Hello there. I'm going to talk about something which I normally don't talk about. Well, in a sense, I do. I love aviation. I love aviation relating to the war. I say the war, normally I'm talking about World War II. And sometimes I am talking about World War I, which was kind of not my style of history. Some of the one of the most significant stories of World War I aviation history is the fact that the Germans had built or were working on a super bomber, and I believe it was a triple-winged aircraft, a monstrous plane. And it was designed to fly to New York, drop bombs on New York, fly a couple hundred miles out to sea, and land next to a U-boat and take the crew back to Germany. The idea being that the Germans felt that if the Americans were actually attacked on the homeland by aircraft, that they would pull their troops out of Germany and bring them back home to defend the homeland. That was their theory. As it turned out, there was a unforeseen advance in the Allied armies, and which overran the place where they were building this thing, so it never got a chance to launch. It was designed to, as I recall, to release the landing gear to cut drag and increase the range so that they could make it across the Atlantic with a bomb load. And the odds of it working were pretty good because there really weren't anything in the order of air defenses at that time. Now, the other incident, which I thought was worth talking about, and there is a famous painting, an oil painting that was done on this, and there's some drawings that have been done on it, and that relates to a Zeppelin. Now, the Zeppelins were filled with hydrogen back then, and basically one day in April 1917, the L-23, which was actually designated I think it was the LZ-66, that was its manufacturing number. It sighted a Norwegian sailing ship. This was at least 2 or 3 masts. It was a rather large sailing ship. And believing that the vessel carried contraband, the Zeppelin commander brought his ship about and dropped a bomb in front of the Norwegian sailing ship. The Norwegian crew knew his meaning, and soon all hands had cleared, and the ship was standing. They were standing by in small boats. What the Zeppelin did is they landed with their Zeppelin. They launched a small boat, and once they released the boat, by lessening the load on the Zeppelin rose, and they couldn't get weapons down into the little rowboat that carried the crew that was going to go on board and check out the ship to see what they were carrying. And so they had flare pistols, or one flare pistol on the ship, on that little boat, and they made their way towards the sailing ship. They checked the paperwork, and the captain asked the skipper of the Royal for his papers, and sure enough, she was loaded with prescribed cargo, lumber, designed for the use in the English coal mines. Thereupon, the mate and a few men of the Zeppelin went aboard the Royal and sailed her to Cuxhaven as a prize of war. So there's a picture, there's a painting of, here we are, a flying machine, the L-23, hovering around this obviously turn of the century sailing ship. It was like 2 different generations, 2 different technologies merging on that day. It turns out that there was a subsequent was a subsequent successful attempt when the L-40 stopped the steamer after landing on the water, and the commander, relying solely on his machine guns, they were basically able to commandeer this ship. But they finally realized that this was really foolhardy, because a properly placed incendiary bullet would take out these hydrogen-laden craft, as was the case in the Hindenburg, which apparently was either set off by a bomb or static when they landed in Lakehurst. But hydrogen ships are not exactly the safest things to fly in, and yet the Graf Spee circled the Earth a couple times using hydrogen. Later on, unfortunately for the L-23, it was shot down later in the war. Typically, when they were shot down, that meant the loss of the entire crew. Basically, in August of that year, 1917, a pup, which is a biplane, launched either from a towed platform or from a makeshift aircraft carrier of the British. Actually, it launched from the HMS Yarmouth and down the Zeppelin L-23 in 1917. But in April 1917, the L-23 did, in fact, capture that boat. So the Germans realized that it really wasn't worth risking a patrol Zeppelin. At the time, the Zeppelins actually could fly higher than the aircraft of that time. They flew them exceptionally light, and they were able to go over the tops of the limitations of the aircraft currently used, but they developed aircraft that could reach them, and of course they were setting these things on fire. There were very few survivors. They didn't use parachutes because of weight considerations, which you might laugh at, but when you look at the space shuttle, the first space shuttle that went up had 2 ejection seats for the 2 pilots, Crippen and Young, and had anything gone off wrong on takeoff, or they had to land, they could have bailed out, going out of the escape system on the shuttle. Later on, they realized that having these escape systems all over the shuttle would have been prohibitive in weight, and as a result of that, when they lost the Challenger, everybody died. Had they had that type of system in place at the time, no doubt these people could have escaped and survived to fly another day. But it's all a matter of money. It's all a matter of weight, payload. In fact, the shuttle tanks, the oxygen tank or the fuel tank, the liquid fuel tank used on the shuttle, at one time had a covering on it, and they decided that the covering weighed too much, and so they took it off. I thought that was a really brilliant idea, and it saved quite a bit of weight. But once again, those damn pieces of that tank, the foam insulation, came off, and I believe it was the Columbia that didn't re-enter correctly because it had damage to its tiles caused by the falling off insulation from those tanks, which in the beginning they were so very proud of themselves for putting those tanks on. Anyhow, there is a painting of this encounter between the L-23 and the Norwegian sailing ship Royal, and I cannot find it at this point. If I ever do, I will put it up on the internet. I think it's priceless, and I'm surprised they don't do a movie about this. I mean, it all comes down to a fairly short period of time. But it was interesting that when they did finally launch that boat, they didn't get the weapons they wanted to properly go and subdue that ship, the Royal. I wonder how long the Royal lasted after the war. Obviously, it wasn't sunk. And that's my brief history of World War I aviation that at least I find of interest. Take care.